In the archives of the Archivo General de Indias in Seville, there is a shipping manifest dated November 14th, 1582. It lists a single cargo, 300 tons of refined silver, stamped with the royal seal, ready for minting. To a modern reader, it looks like unimaginable wealth. To the merchants of the 16th century, it was a financial weapon. Over the next 100 years, the mountains of the Andes would pump roughly 180,000 tons of silver into the global economy. It didn't build the Spanish Empire, it broke it. It triggered the first recorded wave of sustained hyperinflation in European history. It bankrolled proxy wars across 3 continents, and it quietly transferred economic power from Madrid to the merchant banks of Amsterdam and London. This is not a story about explorers or conquistadors. It is a story about supply, demand, and the exact moment a continent discovered that too much money can destroy an economy. The ledger is still open. To understand how a single mountain in the Andes destabilized an entire continent, you have to look at the monetary architecture of early 16th century Europe. It was a hard currency economy. Money was metal. Its value was strictly tied to physical scarcity. By 1500, Europe was suffering from a severe bullion shortage. Trade with the Ottoman Empire and the Levant was draining gold and silver overseas. Agricultural output had stagnated, prices were low. Commerce was constrained by the physical limits of the mint. Kings borrowed against future harvests. Merchants settled accounts in barter or letters of credit. The system was stable, but it was small. Then came April 1st, 1545. A Quechua herder named Diego Hualaupa discovered a vein of nearly pure silver near the summit of a mountain the locals called Potosi. The Spanish crown moved immediately. But extraction was initially slow. The ore was complex. The altitude was brutal. The technology was medieval. By 1572, everything changed. The introduction of the patio process, a mercury-based amalgamation technique developed in Mexico and adapted to the Andes, transformed silver extraction from a manual craft into an industrial operation. Mercury from the Huancavelica mines in Peru and later from Almaden in Spain was shipped across the Atlantic. Indigenous labor was conscripted through the meter system, a brutal rotational draft that demanded thousands of men each year to haul ore, crush rock with iron mallets, and tend the mercury furnaces. The output was staggering. By the 1580s, Potosi alone was producing over 200 tons of silver annually. That was roughly 2/3 of the world's total supply. The silver was stamped into reales de ocho, the Spanish dollar. It became the world's first true global currency. It traveled through the flota system, a heavily armed convoy sailing from Veracruz and Panama to the Guadalquivir River in Seville. But the Spanish crown didn't understand the macroeconomic mechanics of what it was unleashing. They treated silver as income. It was actually inflation. The mechanism of the collapse was simple, and it operated in 3 distinct interlocking phases. First, extraction and taxation. The Crown granted mining concessions to private contractors, but enforced a mandatory 20% tax on all refined metal, known as the Quinto Real. This wasn't just revenue collection, it was a direct, state-controlled pipeline from the Andean highlands to the royal treasury in Madrid. The Crown didn't mine the silver, it leased the risk, but it took the majority of the yield. Second, distribution and debt. The silver didn't sit in Spanish vaults, it was immediately spent. Philip II was fighting the 80 Years' War in the Netherlands. He was defending Mediterranean shipping lanes against the Ottomans. He was maintaining a sprawling imperial bureaucracy across 2 hemispheres. The Crown didn't have a standing tax system to fund it, so it borrowed heavily from Genoese, German, and Spanish banking houses, using future silver shipments as collateral. When the flota finally docked in Seville, the silver was immediately transferred to creditors. It never entered domestic Spanish industry. It never built factories. It never upgraded agricultural infrastructure. It paid for imported French grain, Flemish textiles, Italian mercenaries, and foreign debt service. Third, the velocity shock. The silver entered the European money supply at a rate that completely outpaced the production of goods. Between 1500 and 1650, the European population grew by roughly 40%. Industrial and agricultural output grew at perhaps half that rate, but the money supply tripled. Basic economics dictates the result. More currency chasing fewer goods means higher prices. This is what economic historians call the price revolution. In Spain, the cost of basic commodities rose by nearly 500% over the century. But the real damage spread through trade networks. Silver flowed out of Seville into Antwerp, Lyon, London, and Genoa to pay for imports. Each receiving economy experienced the identical shock. Wages, traditionally set by custom, guild regulation, or royal decree, failed to keep pace with soaring food prices. Real wages collapsed. The purchasing power of the average European artisan was cut in half by 1600. The silver didn't enrich Europe, it redistributed it. It rewarded those who held hard assets, landowners, merchants, creditors. It punished those who lived on fixed incomes or daily wages. It was the first documented case of structural wealth inequality driven purely by monetary expansion. By the late 16th century, the Spanish crown faced a paradox it could not control. The more silver arrived, the more indebted it became. Philip II declared sovereign bankruptcy 4 times: 1557, 1575, 1596, 1607. Each default froze credit markets across Europe. Each time, international bankers responded by charging higher interest rates, forcing the crown to mint and spend even more silver just to cover the debt service. It was a vicious, self-reinforcing cycle. The silver inflow didn't stabilize the economy, it amplified the deficit. The silver also escaped European borders entirely. Through the Manila galleon trade, Spanish colonists shipped American silver directly across the Pacific to Asia. In exchange, they received Chinese silk, porcelain, lacquerware, and tea. The Ming dynasty's tax system, reformed in the 1570s to require land payments in silver, absorbed massive quantities of New World metal. Historians estimate that up to 1/3 of all Potosi silver eventually flowed into the Chinese economy. Spain was literally financing its own commercial rivals. Meanwhile, the Dutch Republic and England watched. They lacked silver mines, but they possessed shipyards, efficient textile mills, and modernized banking systems. They positioned themselves as the logistical and financial intermediaries of the silver trade. They transported the metal. They insured the voyages. They lent to the Spanish crown at compound interest. The silver that left Spanish ports didn't build Spanish prosperity. It built Dutch canals. It funded English joint stock ventures. It capitalized the modern European financial sector. The mountain that was supposed to guarantee Spanish supremacy became an economic trap. By 1650, Potosi's upper veins were depleted. The meter system had decimated the indigenous workforce. Mercury shortages crippled the refining process. Extraction costs skyrocketed. But the damage to Europe's monetary architecture was already permanent. The price revolution had rewired commercial expectations. It accelerated the decline of feudal land rents. It forced a transition from metal-backed currency to credit, paper notes, and state debt. Europe didn't learn how to manage wealth. It learned how to manage inflation. We tend to view the Spanish Empire's decline as a military or political failure, but the ledger tells a different story. It was a monetary one. The crown mistook a surge in liquidity for genuine wealth. They imported a commodity, spent it on liabilities, and allowed inflation to hollow out their domestic productive base. In modern economic terms, they experienced the resource curse centuries before economists had a name for it. Consider the parallel to today. When central banks expand the money supply faster than the economy produces goods and services, the result isn't prosperity, it's asset inflation. It's a quiet transfer of wealth from wage earners to asset holders. It's the same mechanical failure, just operating on digital servers instead of galleon routes. The silver mines of the Andes didn't just fund an empire, they stress-tested the foundations of early modern capitalism. They proved that money is not a store of value, it is a claim on value. And when that claim consistently outpaces the underlying reality, the system corrects, always. The mountain of Potosi still stands. Its terraces are empty now, the furnaces are cold, but the economic laws it exposed are still in play. Every boom, every bubble, every debt cycle echoes the same mechanism. The question isn't whether history repeats, it's whether we recognize the ledger before it balances. If this story made you think, subscribe, because next week we're going deeper into the economic catastrophes that shaped the modern world. The wind always returns, it just changes what it carries.